The door closed harder than it needed to. Not slammed exactly. Just pushed with enough force that the frame rattled and the small brass numbers outside vibrated for a second before settling. My son-in-law had said. His voice carried the kind of certainty people develop when they believe they're finally correcting a long inconvenience. I stood on the porch with a duffel bag in my hand. The bag was older than the house behind me. I'd used it during weekend construction jobs years earlier, back when my daughter still called to ask if I could help paint a wall or fix a sink. Now the porch light clicked off. That part was my daughter. She hadn't said a word during the argument inside. Not when Darren told me I was lingering too long. Not when he started listing the ways the house had become too crowded. She simply stood by the kitchen counter with her arms folded. Silence can take sides without announcing it. When the light shut off, I understood that the conversation was over. The street was quiet. A few houses down, someone's television flickered blue behind their curtains. I slung the duffel bag over my shoulder and started walking. No one followed. The bus station smelled faintly of disinfectant and burnt coffee. I sat on a plastic chair for a while before realizing I had nowhere specific to go. You think about strange things at moments like that, not the big memories people expect, birthdays or holidays. I remembered my daughter at age 7 trying to build a birdhouse out of scrap wood in the garage. The nails kept bending sideways. She got frustrated and tossed the hammer across the floor. I showed her how to hold the nail steady with the side of the hammerhead. Slow, I told her. Let the tool do the work. She had laughed when the nail finally went straight. That memory stayed with me as the bus rolled through the dark streets. I checked into a motel near the highway sometime after midnight. The room had a humming air conditioner and curtains that didn't quite close. The duffel bag sat on the chair. Everything I owned now was either inside that bag or still sitting in the hallway closet at my daughter's house. I slept for a few hours. Morning arrived with thin sunlight and the sound of a vacuum cleaner somewhere down the hall. I walked to the motel lobby for coffee. Near the front desk, a corkboard held flyers and city notices, yard sales, lost pets, municipal announcements. One sheet of paper had a small heading, RIS City Redevelopment Property Program. Below it was a short explanation about abandoned homes being sold for symbolic prices to encourage neighborhood restoration. One address caught my eye. $3. The clerk noticed me reading the flyer. Those places are rough, she said casually. Most people don't bother. Where's the office? I asked. She gave me directions without much interest. The city building was quiet that morning. A clerk behind a glass window looked mildly surprised when I mentioned the program. You're aware the property needs significant repairs, she said. I am. And you understand the purchase price doesn't include renovation requirements. I understand. She slid a stack of papers through the opening in the glass. The transaction itself was strangely uneventful. A few signatures. A receipt printed on thin municipal paper. $3. When I stepped outside, the sky had cleared. The house stood at the end of a narrow block. 2 windows were boarded. The mailbox leaned sideways. Grass had pushed through cracks in the walkway. I unlocked the front door with the key the clerk had given me. Inside, dust hung in the air like a quiet fog. The kitchen sink dripped steadily. I set the duffel bag on the floor. For the first few days, I didn't think much about my daughter. Work filled the hours. I cleared debris from the living room, replaced a broken door hinge, swept the front steps. Neighbors began nodding when they passed. It felt good to hold a hammer again. Slow, let the tool do the work. Weeks passed. Then 2 letters arrived on the same afternoon. The first came from the city redevelopment office. It explained that the block had recently been approved for a revitalization corridor, new sidewalks, improved utilities, potential mixed-use development nearby. The second envelope was thicker. A legal firm representing an estate review had discovered something while updating property records. A narrow parcel of land directly behind my house had never been formally transferred after my wife passed away years earlier. It still belonged to her estate, which meant it belonged to me. The two parcels together created the only continuous lot large enough for a planned development project, already under discussion with private investors. I set the letters down on the kitchen table and read them again. Then I went outside and finished repairing the fence. Several weeks later, a man in a gray suit knocked on the door. He introduced himself as a representative for a development group interested in purchasing land on the block. "We understand you own both parcels," he said. I nodded. "Would like to discuss options." "Of course," I said. We scheduled a meeting for the following week. Word travels strangely through communities. My son-in-law heard about the property before my daughter did. He worked in commercial insurance. Developments like this tended to surface in conversation. One evening a car pulled up in front of the house. My daughter stepped out. She looked different standing on that small sidewalk than she had in the bright kitchen light weeks earlier. Smaller, somehow. I was in the yard tightening a loose board on the fence. She walked over slowly. "I heard about the property," she said. I set the hammer down. For a moment neither of us spoke. The air smelled faintly of fresh wood. "I didn't think you," she began, then stopped. "Disappear." That was the word she didn't finish. "I bought the house the morning after I left," I said. She looked at the repaired porch, the cleared yard, the mailbox now standing straight. "I didn't realize." I nodded once. A few seconds passed. "I should have said something that night," she said quietly. I didn't answer right away. Sometimes understanding arrives long after the moment that needed it. Finally I picked up the hammer again. "Slow," I said, almost to myself. "Let the tool do the work." The board slid neatly into place, and for the first time in a long while the house felt fully mine.